Quickfill gasoline is made right here in America. United Refining Company, who operates Quickfill, refines its gasoline from North American crude oil in Warren, Pennsylvania. When you buy United Refining Company gasoline at Quickfill, you keep jobs and businesses in America. And you keep American families strong. You don't need to send your money overseas when you buy gasoline. Buy American-made gasoline at Quickfill. Quickfill. Driving America.
From baggage claim to pajamas in 10 minutes. Erie International Airport. Fly with ERI.com.
Fly Erie International Airport to Charlotte on American Airlines, your nonstop gateway to the world. Also, we have Breeze Airways flying nonstop to Orlando and Tampa, Florida. A great low-cost carrier providing excellent service to the regional community. Fly Erie International for your travel needs.
Fly with ERI.com.
Welcome to TalkErie.com's Joel Natale Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast. Every day, we tackle the biggest issues that the Erie, PA region faces. Stay informed and involved as we advance the narrative of Erie. Now, here's Joel Natale.
Welcome in Jessica Spitulski. Oh my gosh, I have a cough drop.
It's a little harder to say than the old one. Yeah.
I have a cough drop in my mouth. It's coming. Spitulski. Spitulski. There we go.
A good Polish name.
I love it. Director of the library for the Erie County Public Library. Welcome back. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Let's talk about, because it's been about a year since you.
Well, yeah. So I am a little over 9 months in.
Okay.
The last time we talked was about 6 months ago, and I think I was just at the beginning of trying to, think around what the library was at that moment and what direction we wanted to go. So,
is there a common theme for public libraries like this? I mean, again, this is a government-owned regional asset, and so do libraries kind of take on, kind of a similar theme across the country, or do libraries focus on different things, that...
It depends on what kind of library you're talking about. So if we're talking about public libraries, ideally they are... they don't have a theme other than to be providers of information and programming and things like that. I mean, there are always special libraries, there are university libraries, there are school libraries, and they tend to lean in a certain direction. But when it comes to a public library, you should always see a public library growing and evolving with a community, but you shouldn't really see too much sway in any direction.
Yeah, the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh is the Carnegie Library.
It is indeed, and I feel like probably. I mean, obviously, when I travel, I don't travel that much, but when I travel, I visit libraries and steal ideas. We do that. Right. We all do that to each other, librarians, and when we talk to other librarians across the state, we all have kind of the same goal, which is to connect people to information, to fill the gaps in a community, and to make sure that we try to be the equalizer. We try to be the ramp that gets people to the first step of wherever they're headed.
That's an interesting challenge to kind of get people off the dime. And of course, we talk about the Idea Lab, and for entrepreneurs or people that have an idea or want to communicate through the studio, the podcast, or whatever. But
when I talk about, so I've been able to do a lot of speaking with the other nodes of the Beehive. We're talking about the Idea Lab and entrepreneurs and, Beehive Innovation Network. And we are kind of the outliers in that group, not being a university. Right. But I think we're a really important piece. And as we all talk together, because the Beehive, I'm sure you've heard anybody from the Beehive, so, we meet once a week. We talk about how we can serve. And when I'm involved in those conversations, the library is, not everyone, and I say this all the time, not everyone who steps into business ownership, whether it is full-time business ownership or side gig business ownership or whatever it is ready to go to step one, I'm going to plan. Some people need to learn the language, the lingo of starting a business. Some people need to learn, some people need extra help and resources just to get to that step one. And that's the piece that, that's the part that we play in that in that network.
I mean, and it's an important place because, when you're trying to, develop an idea and you have those resources there, whether it's a 3D printer or, some kind of, computers and so on, it's extremely helpful.
Business workshops. We have a small business symposium coming up March 22nd at the library. It's free for anybody who is interested in learning what they need to know to get started with a business. And it's kind of like that. It's like a sample buffet of business ideas. So, you can't market something if you're not sure what you're marketing. You can't look for financing if you're not sure. You can't start a business in an area if you haven't taken a look at the market area and the needs of the community. And so we try to fill that, that.
Have you felt like that you've been striving to program more at the library, more live events, more, learning opportunities?
I think so, because I think in the time that the Idea Lab has been at the library, I think it was a great idea when it was, put in. I think the purpose of the Idea Lab has kind of fractured, not in a bad way, but in a good way, where we have those people that are kind of using their creative skills in a makery way, and the Idea Lab is an important place for them to be able to do that. But also, we want to use some of those resources for budding entrepreneurs. But really what the needs are those. We need to learn the lingo. We need to understand what it actually means to own a business. I need to know how to go from an idea to a prototype before I can talk to the Beehive node at Penn State. And so, we're trying to fill in those early gaps so that path is accessible to everyone in the community, even people who maybe didn't think that they had what it takes to start a business.
Now, in order to do all of that, you need staff. So tell me, you've been last time we talked, you were in the middle of a reorganization.
I was. I hadn't even gotten it approved yet the last time we talked.
So tell us where you're at with all of that and what does that look like?
Awesome. So the last time I was here, I had pitched this plan to the county executive and got his approval to move forward with that. I think I was either just headed into council or at some point where it hadn't yet been approved. So that reorganization was approved, and so we have set up our structure at the library to be focused on the functions, the essential functions of what we are at the library, and so we have for the past 6 months really been staffing up. So as part of that reorganization, we changed some positions around. We created some middle level positions that were accessible internally. I'm incredibly proud to be able to say that most of the positions that we created that are kind of second tier and above, most of those were filled with internal candidates who had really outgrown the position that they were in prior to the reorganization, had nowhere to grow without investing in an expensive degree.
Yeah.
And so we were able to really make that happen.
You were pointing out to us that when you walked in, it was very flat, and it was like nobody really kind of knew the chain of command, right?
And there were just so many, it's that too many cooks in the kitchen,
right?
Idea.
You needed to kind of make it more of a pyramid.
And we also wanted to make sure that everything we were doing was consistent across the whole library. So we have new supervisors in place and positions that hadn't been there before. These are our longtime library clerks who are doing a phenomenal job. We had some other, mid-level positions that support the tier of assistant directors. Each of our three main functions, our programming, which we call literacy services, our collections, and then our branches, each have a promoted internal candidate who is now an assistant director of their area. And so we have a really strong team in place now, and the beauty of that is we were able to take people who, stayed through some rocky times at the library, so they're obviously committed. They are people with experience, not only in what works but in what doesn't. And so I really, even just as recently as a few weeks ago when we hired the last of our assistant directors, which was our assistant director of literacy services, we have a powerhouse leadership team that, the government doesn't move fast enough for what we want to do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
But yeah, it's been really great.
Do you feel like you're achieving the goals of this reorganization plan?
I think so. I mean, I think we still have a long way to go. We are at the beginning of something that I think could be really wonderful, not just for us at the library, but for the community. But we're also at that point where I think we're going to figure out where our growing pains are. We are discovering. So I am the seventh, if you count interim directors, I am the seventh director in the last 10 years.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And what that means is that there were a lot of people, and this is, not a knock on any of my predecessors, because each of them did, each of them had strengths that made them the right choice at the time. But what means is that there were a lot of things that were started that were never finished. Mm-hmm. That means that there were a lot of things that were put on the back burner until people could get to them, and then they didn't stay long enough to get to them. So, we are kind of in housekeeping mode at this point in all of our departments, figuring out what we're doing, making sure we're communicating that to the public well. But yeah, I mean, I think if I had set a goal of where I'd want to be today, I think we are where I had hoped we would be by today. And now it's just a matter of taking this really great team of people that are really ready to move forward and do some wonderful things.
I would imagine for some of your long-term staffers, having 7 different directors, it's always the chasing of the new shiny thing that just gets to be
a lot. And that was part of my goal of splitting our departments the way that they are now structured after our reorganization. Our professional staff, every director has something that's their thing. And so for some directors, that was the collection. And for some directors, that was programming. And for some directors, that was something else. And so these poor professional librarians were constantly being pulled back and forth trying to do everything. But each director was changing priorities for them. And so, to eliminate that push and pull, I mean, I hope to be in the position, until I retire, but to eliminate that push and pull should something happen, giving each professional staff person a clear priority, a clear path, something to own that will not be changeable once we're all settled in this structure, I think will only be good for staff and good for the community, because then we are really able to put the attention onto, to some of these things that they've been missing. I mean, our collection, we've been spending Anitra Gates is our assistant director of collections, and she's been with the library a long time. And I don't think any of us had a real understanding of just how outdated and in need of updating our collection was until we had a person whose only job was to own that, and make it something that makes us good stewards of all of those community resources.
I want to get back to that in a second, but before, just to put a cap on staffing, what kind of culture do you feel like you want to foster at the library with your staff?
Ideally, I would like us to be. I think we are slowly but steadily reaching a point where we can create some boundaries for people to work within, but then allow them to use their creativity and their experience. I mean, there are so many, the number of great ideas that come to my desk and to me as I'm working at the library from our staff, every staff member, everybody from our part-time clerks who are, even our per diems who are just, substitutes, all the way up through my leadership staff. I mean, there are so many great ideas. I want to create an environment where everyone knows where the boundaries are, and then we can use, we can allow people the freedom to try some of those things.
Kind of swim in the middle.
Exactly.
Wow. All right, Jessica, again, you are, your main branch, the Blasco, is right there in the middle of, $100 million project on the Bayfront Highway. How's that been impacting you guys as far as that
Well,
goes?
I think it's, road construction is never fun. I think the project, when it's completed, is going to be awesome. We have had some disruption. They've been running utilities under our parking lot. I have to say, though, and this is not just me, my staff and I obviously talk about this a lot because we try to get ahead of everything. PennDOT and their contractors have been fabulous when it comes to keeping us informed about what's going to happen. I mean, it's kind of like that we know this is going to hurt you, but I
Right.
promise, but we'll give you a good idea of, of what's happening. So we have been completely open from the Holland side. I expect that by the time they make their way to Holland, that State Street will be open enough for people to come through. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. We've had people, kind of move their library habits out to some of our branches.
Is
which
that
is
right?
Part
You've
of
actually
part of the
seen-
goal of getting
seen the
people
patrons.
out.
Wow.
But it's like anything else, it's a pain point, but
Right.
it'll be great when it's done.
The park. I mean, is the parking lot generally always full?
It
or-
is always full, and we have people who park along Holland. We have people who park over at Intermodal and walk over, and so I think that's probably our biggest, the hardest thing for us has been the restriction of our parking lot.
So if they do go to a branch, but they want a book that's at Maine, what's the step? How do you do that?
So one of the many things that libraries do behind the scenes is logistics. And so we have a system where we have delivery drivers on our staff that move books and materials from location to location. That's our branches. That's the independents in the public library, in the public libraries of Erie County. So Albion and Rice Avenue and all of those libraries. And then also now we have through the district, we have a delivery driver that runs twice a week between Erie County and Crawford County, so that our district is able to work as a unit to expand, access to both Erie County and Crawford County residents to any library resource within both counties.
So you can browse at the branch, order at the branch, or order online, right?
Yep.
To get any materials.
Absolutely.
Or
Just
whatever.
put it on hold, and whatever mechanism you choose to be notified, we can let you know when it's ready to be picked up. We can send it to any of our locations or a bookmobile stop. I mean, our bookmobile is out on the road. 11 days out of 14. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's not the only construction you're dealing with, though. Gannon is building their aquatic lab inside of the Blaska Library. Tell me how that's going from your perspective.
They are. So they, it was, a couple weeks ago now, maybe a month. I don't know. Time flies around this time of year. It's hard to believe we're already at the end of February. But so the temporary walls went up around the space that will become the Gannon Center for Lake Erie Education and Research. And so for us, they put up the walls around the space. They painted the outside. There's trim on the outside. They've made sure that we have access to all of the emergency exits that are within that space. They've been fairly quiet.
So you're not hearing a ton of.
We're not really
construction
hearing a
noise,
ton, no. And if they've been doing loud things, it's been outside of working hours. Okay. I know that they have systems put in with negative air so that the dust stays out of our area. They've sealed up that whole their whole workspace from the inside. So we're fairly separate. They have a check-in with us every 2 weeks just so that we can share any issues. We can make sure that everyone is on the same page about anything that would potentially affect us. But other than having the walls up, we've seen very little. In the process of doing that, kind of rethinking our spaces, though, we have been able to get we have moved the public internet lab back to the first floor.
Okay.
We have moved a lot of things around in the library, just to thoughtfully use the space that we have. So we've created spaces. We have groups. We have Bible study groups and knitting groups that are kind of informal, organic groups that have started to gather at the library, and we wanted to make sure that they had a space where they weren't having to drag around tables or work around people who are studying. So we're still kind of evolving, inside, working things out. But yeah, and honestly, this is, for us, it will be the kickoff of, kind of a series of construction, because we were the lucky recipients of a grant to redesign the children's library, which will include building an outdoor teaching deck on the back of the children's library, and so. This is the beginning of this. This is kind of like our getting our toes wet with a little bit of construction in our building before we dive into some big construction of our own.
Has there been any impact of the construction of the Gannon space on your patrons themselves?
I think it depends on what you mean by impact. I mean, I think that space. I mean, we're like a year into knowing that space was going to become something that wasn't library space. So I think we have stopped using that space. We had moved our things out of that space. I think the temporary walls being up are a there are some narrow areas around the walls, the way that they put them up, but it's kind of like when I was talking about the PennDOT construction. It's one of those things where there are some temporary pains, and that's just part of construction. Anybody who's ever remodeled their house can relate. But once it's done and it's open, and it'll be another resource that's in our space that is managed and funded by Gannon.
Yeah. All right, we've got to take our break here at the bottom of the hour. Jessica Spitulski is with us. She is the library director of the Erie County Public Library, and I mean a lot of projects on the physical plant, isn't there?
Lots of projects in general. I think I told you last time I was here. I see projects everywhere. So
that's amazing stuff.
You have been called
to do good.
To feed the hungry.
To love with action.
To be a light in the darkness.
To love your neighbor.
To teach wisdom.
To walk humbly.
To love mercy.
To care for the least of these.
Will you accept the call?
This is our city.
Our mission.
Visit eriecitymission.org/volunteer to accept the call today.
All year round, Frontier Home Products and Design has what you need to make your home comfortable and beautiful. Relax on a new timber tech deck designed by Frontier's experts. A new fireplace from Frontier Home Products Fireplace Gallery adds warmth and serenity to any home. Beauty and versatility at Frontier Home Products and Design Center, 4213 Peachtree, 5th next to the Bayfront Highway.
Frontier Home Products and Design Center. Discover a new frontier.
PA contractor number PA039007.
Get paid to drive. Start a new career behind the wheel at the EMTA. If you are looking for a high-paying and rewarding career with full benefits and paid training, stop by or apply online today with the EMTA. Plus, EMTA riders can now enjoy free Wi-Fi on new, clean, and environmentally friendly buses to travel all over Erie County. Visit ridethee.com for more information.
Get on board EMTA. Get on board EMTA. Get on board.
We were talking off air, and you had mentioned something earlier about that your collections were getting dusty.
I would say out of shape. They were out of shape. It's like that. It's that end of winter. You haven't really been taking good care of yourself. That's kind of where our collection is.
Too many donuts.
Yeah. Not quite to heart attack status,
right.
but definitely in need of some shape up.
So there's a couple different ways that you can attack this dilemma, because like we've been saying, there's technology is changing everything, and so not only can we go online to order a book and have it ready for us when we get to the library, or we can read a book from the library on our Kindles or on our ebooks or what have you. And so you're now having to navigate all this stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. And not only making sure that because we still, even though digital resources are the part of our collection that are steadily increasing, we still have a significant amount of circulation of physical materials.
Sure.
And we need to make sure that both are available to our patrons, that they are up to date, that they are in good shape. I mean, because we as the library, we don't own those. Those belong to the taxpayers. We are, we have to be good stewards of that resource that we are, that we are the managers, hired to take care of. So.
Yeah. So how do you make that decision? Because you said that demand for digital is huge, and so I use the digital resources almost exclusively. I mean, every once in a while I do come down and I'll borrow an Erie book or something. It's usually like David Frew or somebody like that, an Erie author, or Jerry Skripczak or so on. But I really will read Grisham. I love the Grisham novels, or read a John Meacham, historical
Kellerman's.
narrative.
My mom does all the Kellermans.
Yes, but I want to read them on digital, and sometimes I'm like, 26th in line. I asked my wife, the series that she's into is Louise Penny.
Yes.
And again, it's pretty hard for her to get the new one.
It is
on the
those
digital.
high demand things. It is, and so that's some of that balance is dictated by state standards, and we as a district library center, our standards are stricter.
Yeah.
And so we have to have a certain amount of expenditures every year in physical materials, and a certain amount of expenditures in AV materials, and a certain amount of expenditures in digital materials.
Okay, so it's really delineated.
It is,
for
and
you.
and we can always go above that if the funds are available. But we have a certain threshold that we have to meet in order to continue to qualify for state funding, which we don't want to lose because it's a significant amount of money. And so, some of that is dictated for us. But when it comes to, when the problem with digital resources at the library, and I would say at least 3 or 4 times a week, because I do I get emails from patrons, I get phone calls from patrons, but I'm one of those people, I'm down on the floor a lot.
Right.
And having more digital resources is a request that we get a lot. But I think people, when you think of, and this is what we were talking about on the break, when you think of a digital book, you think of the cost that you would pay if you purchased that Kindle book on Amazon, or you purchased that, that book from Barnes and Noble and downloaded it to your reader. But that is not the same cost of a multi-use license. And so it is a book. It is something that, or an audiobook. It's something that you consume the way that you do a book or an audiobook, but you have to think of it a lot more like software licensing. Having worked in the IP world prior to coming to the library, I mean, this is a licensing situation. And as any other, commercial industry, the cost of digital materials, especially multi-use licenses for digital materials, is continuously going up.
Wow.
So, advocating to your library for more digital resources is important. Advocating to those who hold the purse, which in our case would be county council and county administration, that we need more funds for digital resources is important. But lobbying the publishers themselves is what's important, because unless consumers tell them that they want, unless they have some reason to make these licenses more available for libraries, there's no profit for them in lowering the price of something that a whole bunch of people will read and then not purchase the book themselves.
So give me a ballpark here. Let's say if I were to buy the latest John Grisham novel for $20 on my Kindle. Mm-hmm. What do you think that would cost you guys?
I actually don't know, and I know that it has to do with how long we have it. So it's more like a subscription. I don't do any of those purchasing.
Gotcha.
So, so we will purchase the license for, let's say, a year, or we will purchase the license. Some of them work that way. Some of them are perpetual licenses. Like I said, it sounds a lot like I'm talking about software, because we're talking about a digital resource. But that's kind of how
it has actually time limits and things like that.
Yeah, and so and then there's the so that would be what we have as Libby resources, the books, and then there's Hoopla, and that one you don't have a wait for, but that's subscription based as well, and the costs of that are going up. And so everything comes down, like everything else in the world right now, everything comes down to cost. We can purchase anything that anyone wants if we have the money to purchase it.
So let's say if you were buying, I don't know how many you, again, we're talking about the collections here at the library. Mm-hmm. If you were buying the latest, greatest Grisham book or what have you, does Danielle Steele still exist? Probably not. No. I'm really dating myself. But I mean, would you like buy 3 or 4 copies and then maybe they wouldn't last that long? Mm-hmm. Maybe you would sell them at some point.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, the other thing that we're trying to do to get around that is to to join together as consortium. So if you are someone who has used Libby at the library, if you haven't, I encourage you to come to your library. We'll teach you how to use it. It's really a great resource. But if you are someone who's used it, you probably already know that you don't just have access to the Erie County Public Library's catalog. You also have access to Oil Creek's catalog, and you have access to everybody within our region. And so public libraries are trying to work together to get around the cost of this by, becoming these larger regions, these larger units where we have purchasing power as a unit. So maybe the Erie County Public Library only has one copy of that Grisham, but then Oil Creek has a copy of that Grisham, and Newcastle has a copy of that Grisham. And so now using your Erie County Public Library card, rather than having access to one copy, you have access to, say, 13.
Right.
So that you can choose the one with the shortest wait, and we're able to kind of distribute people that way. It's tricky. That is one of, I feel like, 10,000 hurdles that we have to jump through to try to, as library directors, to try to connect people to the things that they want.
And I think it would come down to a little bit to philosophy of how you're going to approach this. Again, if you're feeling like that the collection was out of shape, what would get it trim and buff, if you will? I mean, like what's the vibe that you're trying to portray through the collection?
So, we are trying to, and this comes out of our reorganization and having the collection managed by a group of people who are only responsible for the collection. We had medical texts, and this is not the fault of anybody who came before me, because that's one of the easiest things. You can purchase and purchase and purchase, but actually going through what you have and cleaning it out, it's like that closet that you have at home where you throw the good clothes go in the front, but you still have kind of the old crappy clothes in the back sometimes. I mean, we have medical texts that we are pulling out of our collection now that date back to the 70s. So if you're looking for diabetes resources and you're not the kind of person who will look at a publication date to make your choice as to what to take out, it doesn't seem ethical to be a library to provide that kind of information. So there's a process, and we talked a little bit about going to get my master's in library science the last time I was here. But one of the things that you learn is how to weed a collection, similar to weeding your garden, where you go through and you pull out. And there are lots of reasons why we would pull something. It hasn't circulated in years. It is outdated information. Maybe there's a new, 2 newer editions since that one was put on the shelf, and we want to pull those things out. We want to make sure that if someone is coming into the library, I mean, some of it is, we're a library, and so there are 247,000 people in Erie County. Think about the number of hands that are, on a book. Some of them are just gross.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
While,
you can't always, things get damaged, and so we're really we're being aggressive about clearing out. And I have the people that are in charge of that, both our assistant director of collections and Matthew Yar, assistant director of branches. I mean, they're being pretty aggressive about pulling things off the shelf and getting rid of them if they are not of a quality that we would want people to have. And some of those are being replaced if they're just in bad shape, but people like to take them out. But other things, it's sometimes you have to clear things out in order to leave room for the new things that are coming in. So
I would think you'd still want the classics, though.
Absolutely, of course.
You're always
there are
gonna
things
have War and
and
Peace.
those are the kinds of things that we have access to technology, databases and things that tell us how often something circulates. We also, a lot of the things that we put on our shelves, people sometimes wonder how we choose what we buy, and of course we have professional librarians who do that. But a lot of what we purchase comes from patron requests. We actually have on our website a link where you can suggest a title, and if it is of a reasonable literary quality and, it fits something that we don't have in the library, we buy it.
Nice. Yeah. I think we've beat up the collection. No, I mean it's great.
We have a wonderful collection, but I want to make sure that it's the best that it can be, and I have the right people, the right people in place now on that to do that. And then once we do that, we can kind of analyze what's missing in our collection. How is it balanced, with age and viewpoint, and we want a collection that reflects our community. We want a collection that suits people, but we can't do a good job of filling in what we need without getting rid of the things that we don't need.
I'm going to date myself here a
Please
second.
do.
So how much is a public library responsible for holding periodicals like journals? And so I know at when I would do my research again, and I could look at any number of medical journals or literary journal, I mean just journals of every stripe. Is that part of the mission for a public library necessarily?
So I think we are not a research library, and that's one of the conversations that we've been having is also just defining what our purpose is. We're not a research library, so we will not have every thing that you could possibly want that ever existed in history.
But you might have JAMA, though.
But we do have, probably going back fairly far, but we do have areas, so we have the Heritage Room. So local history, that is something where we keep, yearbooks back through generations and generations and generations. And we keep, there are areas that we've identified as a need for the community to keep that. But we're not a research library. And I think that's important for people to know that, as a public library, we are vibrant and we want to make sure that we, that we kind of keep that balance of living 10 years in the past where we have things that people might want to see from the past, but we're also preparing people for 10 years into the future. And that's...
So it might be a collection of Time magazine more than...
But we always have, and we've done a little moving with our periodicals too, where our current issues are kept very close now to past issues. So you can go back pretty far for most of the periodicals that we have available.
All right, so we're down to our last 5 minutes or so with Jessica Spitulski. It really does. Let's talk about. What 2025, what's the plan here? What are some of the events and so on that you're thinking about?
Sure. So, internally speaking, 2025 is kind of our year, like I said, to get in shape. That is collection. We talked a lot about the collection, but it's also programming, really defining what programming as a public library means and how we can do that better. And I have my little listy of things to do because we do, even as we're trying to kind of reshape and reform things so that they're the best, we do have a lot of things coming up. So I mentioned the Small Business Symposium on March 22nd. That one you can call the library to sign up for. We have an Earth Day extravaganza coming up. This will be the second year of doing that. And many of these are things that we started in-house that we've, made friends with lots of other organizations that have similar missions. So that one will be partnering with LEAF. We'll be partnering with Master Gardeners. We have several partners on that one. The month of May is Remake Learning Days. And so that's a very STEM-focused, for kids mostly, but a very STEM-focused. Hysteria will be back this year.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So Alyssa Johnson, who is our communication and outreach coordinator, has been in contact with through Erie Yesterday's group. I think there are maybe 35 or 40 different organizations that we're working with to bring back Hysteria in a new way. It will be later in the year than it has been in the past because we are rolling that then into our summer library program.
Okay.
So last year's summer library program was one of the largest responses to the summer library program that we've had in, at least as far back as I could find data, a decade and a half.
Wow.
And what was most impactful was that it wasn't just children who were participating. It was adults too. And I think it's really important to have that, to have those adults both participate for their own reasons, but also modeling that kind of, participation and behavior for the children in their life. So we are moving Hysteria into our summer library program as one of the largest adult programs within our summer library program. And we're joining a lot of other libraries in Pennsylvania. Our theme this year for our summer library program is Color Our World, which is one that is provided for us by the Office of Commonwealth Libraries, and a lot of people in the state are doing that. So there will be lots of opportunities for artwork and art of all kinds, creative art, performance art.
Do you get a sense that the library is hitting the mark on accessibility? And I mean inclusivity. We talk about that this is the great convening place of anyone from any socioeconomic strata and so on.
I think what we are learning is that we are probably reaching the threshold of, and there are always more people that will come to the library. I think we're kind of reaching a threshold of how many people we can get into our spaces to participate. I think a lot of what our focus will be as we work through things is finding ways to get the library to where people already are. So you will see us this summer doing a lot of things off-site. You'll see us this summer working with a lot of organizations like the Housing Authority of the City of Erie and some of these areas where, you know, we're trying to identify parts of the county that are not being reached by the library, where there is, for some reason, a difficulty to get to our spaces, so that we can make sure that everyone in the county has access to our resources.
Yeah. The bookmobile still a thing?
Bookmobile is still a thing. It's out on the road. It is... through our reorganization, we kind of transitioned the bookmobile back to its original purpose, which is to be primarily a circulation vehicle. You will sometimes still see it out. You know, Alyssa loves the bookmobile, so you'll still see it out at events here and there. Right. But it really is, you know, we are working to try to fulfill the purpose of the bookmobile, which is to bring those resources out to, you know, to other areas. But, you know, I'm a big dreamer. And so, I mean, I can imagine a future where we have, you know, services for shut-ins where we're able to, you know, bring almost DoorDash style, things resources to people who aren't able to get to the library, who can't get to a bookmobile stop. I mean, I can see that yes, I think we are meeting the accessibility needs of a lot of people in the county, but I think, you know, like anything else, there's lots of room to grow.
At what point is the library part of the solution to some of the greater literacy and learning needs of the community? I'm thinking of one of the great concerns I have is our graduation rate at Erie High. It's at 75%.
Yep.
Again, you don't have a direct authority or whatever, but would the library be able to be a convener or an advocate, a cheerleader for just better learning outcomes across our community?
I think the answer to that is yes, and I think it's not. I think that's not the only large issue where the library can support the community in ways that people don't always think of libraries. We're piloting with a few school districts. So school districts are losing their librarians. And so one of the ways, you know, budgetary reasons, staffing shortages, whatever the reason may be. And so we are working with school districts, and we'll expand this across the county if we're able, to try to make sure that those students don't lose their access to library services. You know, when it comes to workforce development, a lot of what we are doing in support of the Beehive Network is a piece of that. But we also, you know, we partner with organizations where if you are looking to get a job, you can come and have a resume put together for you in a single session in a single day. You can get prep for, you know, one-on-one preparation for interviews. We have tech help people who can, you know, if you've never done a virtual interview, lots of first interviews are on Zoom or Teams or something now. We have people in-house who will talk you through that process. Childcare, you know, can we provide opportunities for learning opportunities for childcare providers? Can we help be a bridge for, you know, childcare providers and schools to help create training areas where, you know, if you want to be a childcare provider and you want to be certified, you have to have a certain number of hours of shadowing, educational and children's programming. We do that daily. You know, we can be a site for, I think there are so many of the larger issues that a lot of people, a lot of great minds in our area are talking about right now that the library really is a part of and can be a part of.
We're going to leave it there. Jessica Spitulski, the library director, Erie County Public Library. Continued success.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Joel Natale Show, Erie, Pennsylvania's daily podcast from TalkErie.com. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcatcher and get involved by emailing joel@TalkErie.com.